Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just give us a few moments and we'll be getting started shortly. This is the Mysterious Bookshop's Aidan Truhen event. We're broadcasting live through Facebook and YouTube, wherever you're watching, and you should be able to comment through either avenue. And then we'll be reading your comments later in the event for our Q&A. So I guess I just, kind of if you are waiting for us to get started, or washing dishes or across the room, or just taking one moment for you to be able to turn around and give us your attention, and we'll be getting started momentarily. All right.
If you're washing dishes, feel free to come to my house next. Just a joke. So Tom, shall we take it away? No.
This whole elegant section here with this terribly nice fabric is just me grabbing the nearest blanket and throwing it over the top of the enormous pile of unfinished administrative paperwork that is sitting right here, about which I am stunningly embarrassed.
Well,
that was my childhood bedroom cleaning strategy, was just to cover things up and hope my mom wouldn't see. So I'm the same.
All right. Well, my name is Tom Wickersham. I'm here from the Mysterious Bookshop in New York City. And tonight, it's my real pleasure to welcome Aidan Truhen, also known as Nick Harkaway, something which will certainly be addressed later in the questions and his conversation, I'm sure. He is the author under the name of Aidan Truhen of The Price You Pay, and now joins us tonight for 7 Demons. I'm still not used to which mirror reflection I'm doing. Not signed copies, because unfortunately he's on the other side of the Atlantic, but copies available through the Mysterious Bookshop. And joining Aidan in conversation tonight is Charles Finch. Charles is a crime writer himself. He is the author of the Charles Lennox mystery series, most recently An Extravagant Death. And his first nonfiction book, What Just Happened, Notes on a Long Year, will be released this coming November. And so now Charles will take it away. Thank you again all for joining us, and enjoy our interview with Aidan and Charles.
Well, thank you, first of all, so much to Tom and to the Mysterious Bookshop. I know, Nick, I'm not sure, have you ever come across to New York and visited the Mysterious?
I have. I've been to New York, but I haven't been to the Mysterious Bookshop. But I'm persistently lost in New York. Like I was in New York in the mid-late 90s for quite a long time, and I'm constantly looking for that New York, and it's not there. Which I guess is an experience.
The dream that one day all the construction will stop and they'll be just finished. But anyway, next time you go to New York, I insist that you go to the Mysterious Bookshop, because well, just as a reader and a writer, having read several of your books and feeling, of course, like I know you with the presumption that all readers do, I feel like you would love the Mysterious, and it's a treasure. And especially now, after this difficult year, your orders there and your shopping there mean so much. And it's just a great place to get lost in the shelves. There's just nowhere I'd rather be. So
I'm there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And while you're there, if you're in New York right now, listen to this. This is the book to buy, 7 Demons. I read it in about 1.5 sittings. And your first book is Adrian Truhen, which is a pseudonym. It was called The Price You Pay. It had this inimitable voice. It's the story of Jack Price, who's a coffee dealer. What's the word for a coffee?
Trader. He's a coffee trader.
Coffee trader. I should have, yeah. I mean, I was at Trader Joe's yesterday. That should be on the tip of my tongue. And it was this incredibly funny, unpretentious yet thoughtful and smart thriller, gonzo violence, over the top sort of calamities. And I think I compared it in the Times book review to Martin Amis on mescaline, which is a line I stand by, whether or not it offends you.
No, right. I was like, now how do I do that again?
Well, you just got to get the mescaline. Well, so this second book is just as riveting, and I want you to maybe tell your audience, the people who are here to listen tonight, about this accelerant doused fireball that is 7 Demons.
So with the first book, with The Price You Pay, you had a guy who had a perfectly ordinary kind of mid-grade criminal job that he was doing in a very relaxed and peaceful way until the sky fell on him and all kinds of terrible things happened, and he did terrible things to the world to kind of make it all be right again. And it was basically, it was a very simple story. It was just like the 7 worst people in the world have just been hired to come and kill you, and now you get to do all the terrible stuff that you've kind of, when you're sitting having a cup of coffee and you think, well, if I was a supervillain, I wouldn't do it like that. I'd do it like this. He gets to do all those things, and he's like, yes. But then when you've done that and you've survived, and spoiler, there are 2 books, you then have a problem, because what do you do next? You can't go back to the status quo. The status quo has been completely destroyed. You have a new thing. And in the course of the first book, he makes a bunch of friends who are, I think it's fair to say, extremely terrible and dangerous individuals. And now he has a bunch of terrible, dangerous individuals who are bored. And that is not... When people express their boredom and their emotions through the medium of explosions and international coups, you don't really want them bored. You want them very much to be engaged and tranquil. And so, he has, and he's kind of basically ended up in a kind of Addams Family situation where he's Gomez Addams. He's like, he's got to look after these people. He doesn't really know why. He's not really the guy. So what do you do with that? Basically, it's like my kids. You kind of like, let's take them on a day trip. And in the context of the 7 demons, what that means is you're going to take them to rob a bank, because that's a classic of criminal enterprise, right? I mean, who doesn't love a bank robbery? So you've got to love your classics. So off they go to rob a bank, and it's the 7 demons, so you can't just rob any bank. It has to be the bank. So off they go.
And I liked that. I liked how, it became much more than a bank robbery story while also staying a very precise bank robbery story, which I'm sure was hard to pull off. Or did you just sort of sail through it?
I did not just sail through it. The first one I sailed through, it's very linear, it's very simple. It's like there are 7 people, and he has to beat, in one way or another, he has to beat all of them. And that's, it gives you the shape of a story. This, I was like, haha, I will once again sail through this, and it will be a relaxing thing. It's fun, but it turns out that when you're telling a kind of bank heist come long con come whatever, with 7 characters instead of like 1 central character, that is more intricate, and there are a lot more moving parts, and it took me a lot longer, and I got very frustrated and irritated, and I threw things across the room a great deal, and I was in other ways extremely mature. But yeah, no,
this is, I was gonna say myself that, the price you pay, there's at least the illusion at the start of plausibility. Like, we know that Jack is a former coffee trader. He's sort of peripherally on the drug business in California, and kind of living his life. This book starts at a different level of intensity, I would say. He has, as you say, this bored quasi family, and the only way to satisfy them is by, robbing this bank. Something I was thinking about is like how you imagine yourself now in a second book, because the voice is there. Jack, what makes these books is Jack Price's like incredibly vivid, funny, quick, topsy-turvy voice. Now you have that voice, but in terms of the world building, is it strange to go from sort of a crazy thing happens to a guy who's sort of equipped to deal with crazy things to a crazy thing happens because they're initiating it? Did it change the way you wrote the novel?
It changes the dynamic, and also, I did the thing that you must never do in a kind of, in any series, but in a kind of crime setting. I took him out of his city.
Yeah. Well, the book starts with him getting stabbed in the leg in Switzerland, I should say.
And crime stories are very, they're very atmospherically based. They're very landscape based. They're very cityscape based. So, Raymond Chandler is, Philip Marlowe is indistinguishable from Los Angeles in that period. Kind of the architecture and stuff. And partly because there have been those movies, but it's also because you just, the two are just constantly intermingled. The geography is intermingled in the stories and so on. And it's all to do with kind of, society and so on as well. So everything, where it is. And when I was writing Price You Pay, it was when I was writing it, I was seeing New York the way it was when I knew it, but I know that the city he lives in is not New York. And my editor, Edward Kastman, was like, this is very clearly not New York. I think it's London. And I was like, okay, it's very clearly not London. So it is in a kind of fundamental way, it is the city.
Sure.
In the same way that, the city that Neo lives in The Matrix is the city. It's every city.
It's a holographic stand-in for all cities.
Exactly. And the way that you
Well,
can tell that it's not London is because the police are heavily armed all the time, which they're just in London is still not the case. I mean, but yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, have you started to think about this city having its own properties, and have you started to like map its geography in your head? And something I was thinking about is there's this concept. I am a literary critic, so there's this concept, the principle of first departure, which I was thinking about, which is the presumption that as long as you can, you assume that you're in our world until the author's indicates otherwise. And in Seven Demons, I was never quite sure which side of that line I was on, which is kind of like an exhilarating feeling. And I was wondering if you write it specifically that way.
I mean, the thing is with Jack is that geography is tonal. Everything about these stories is kind of the thing that I know is that the place where they will fall apart is if I can't hit the tone. Because actually, as long as you kind of keep moving in that slightly manic way and you move forward, you'll forgive me if if they get the geography upside down. That just does not matter. The whole thing will be okay. But if the tone comes apart, then it's done. You're going to drop out of the book. You maybe won't pick it up again. So so the geography serves the tone and the drama rather than the other way around. And it's your predecessor in literary and cultural criticism, Robert Warshaw, wrote about the gangster in this way. It's like the gangster is the man of the city. I love that essay. I read it when I was at university, and there's all kinds of kind of meta commentary to be done about Warshaw and who he was and what his period was and so on. But I love that essay. And so Jack is in that sense, he's the gangster of the city, except that in the second book, here he is, and the Seven Demons are global. So he has to be able to go anywhere, and he does. They have the jet, and they can be anywhere in the world in a few hours. So everywhere is another neighborhood. Colombia is
interesting.
Is one neighborhood.
It's kind of like what's the sci-fi novel where you can go anywhere? It's kind of like that, where just you can shift context extremely quick. Is it Discworld that does that? I can't remember.
I don't know.
So I'm glad you brought up. Sorry, I'm glad you brought up tone, because actually something that interested me is that there were real moments of emotion in this book, and I'm thinking of a few of the deaths, of which there are many, but a couple of them actually carry some emotional weight. The talks between Jack and Doc, who's his sort of love entanglement.
It's terrifying.
And I was wondering,
girlfriend, yes,
and a terrifying sociopathic, no, maybe not sociopath, a terrifying murderer. Let's just leave it there, and a doctor. How do you balance those extremes of this violence, and then how do you pull it back in order to like find the emotion in these characters? That struck me as like.
I think they bounce off each other. I think they are. You can't have one without the other. And you talk to people who write horror stories, and very often what they'll do is they'll make you laugh first before they try to scare you. Because when you've laughed yourself out, that's when it's possible to scare you, because you've already given your humor to the person who's telling the story. You've already given control over their laughter, over your laughter. So then when it comes to the moment when it's scary, you don't have that option anymore. I'm a big fan of Monty Roberts, who sort of works with horses, and Billy sort of is trying to work on kind of horse-human communication. And one of the things that he said years ago when I saw him live was that you have to own all the directions. When you're in dialogue with a horse, you can't leave the horse with backwards as an option, because then if they're upset with you, they'll go backwards. And that is not a situation you want to be in. So you have to kind of control all the directions. And I think that's very good also for fiction. You've got to own the directions. If you're going to do love, you have also to do despair. If you're going to do horror, you have also to do laughter. And if you can do that, then you're constantly sort of sliding backwards and forwards along those axes. And you have a great deal of leeway in what you do, and people aren't quite sure whether they're laughing or crying for a while, and then you can tip them in one direction or the other. And I think that's very, so I think the contrasts actually help rather than making it more difficult to do. I mean, but and this sounds ridiculous in the context of Jack Price, it's actually even fairly crazy in the context of what I write normally, but anytime that there is a death, I want that death to feel like it matters. I don't like stories where people just get mowed down, kind of A-Team style. It's a dramatic device, and you see it in the movies, whatever, and I don't refuse to watch those movies or anything like that, but I feel like in these stories, when they do something terrible, it should be acknowledged that this is terrible. And then when they do,
Well,
and when they choose a pathway.
Well, you do something I was very glad about, which is the ultimate bad guy. I hate it when the ultimate bad guy's death is instantaneous, which says something really bad about me, I think, because I want the ultimate bad guy to have to realize his defeat.
Yeah.
You need that minute of suffering and defeat just before he or she quietly pops off.
Yes, I mean it's tone and it's rhythm, isn't it? You've got to have that moment of satisfaction. I was reading something to my kids the other day, and it's a great series of books, and I'm obviously not going to name it because I'm what I'm about to say. But you get, and then there's a final showdown. And it's just like that. The bad guy's gone. Really? Like we are a few 100,000 words into this story, and you're going to take literally, I would think, half a page of event to deal with the big bad guy. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, is that a missed opportunity? I mean, and it's extraordinary because usually, in these books, these things play out in this kind of to and fro way, and you feel real jeopardy, and, sometimes they do lose and then they have to pick themselves up and try again. And I was like, gosh, goodness, were we hungover that morning? I mean, what happened there? It was like,
that's called a deadline, I think. I guess maybe it was a reaction to this cliche of Dr. No, doing the 10-minute laser, making its way across the room to James Bond. But anyway, you mentioned, and I was curious, you said that you were reading to your children. And I want to go back a bit now because you do have these two authorial identities, Aidan Truhen and Nick Harkaway. And I want to go back and find out what made you choose those two identities, and also what made you the writer you are. So if you could just take us back to your bedroom when you're, say, 10 or 12 or 14 or whatever age you really felt most immersed in fiction first, or in nonfiction or whatever it was. What are the books on your bedside table that are most dog-eared? What are the books that you just keep going back to that were formative and are still in your DNA, maybe?
Okay, so until I'm 10, it's The Lord of the Rings, over and over again.
Okay.
And you know what? I read that to my kids the other day. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff wrong with it, and which people talk about quite freely and so on. But gosh, every so often he did some really wonderful writing. Because I had not really registered that. I enjoyed the stories. I didn't really realize quite how good he was. I knew that Farmer Giles of Ham was surprisingly good, which is that little short story about the farmer who kills or who fights a dragon notionally. But yeah, so it was Tolkien then, and then later there was some Conan Doyle in there and some P.G. Wodehouse. These are the books that my dad was reading to my brothers. So we always had the Speckled Band at Christmas. And then,
that's an amazing tradition. The Holmes and Watson short story where they go and defeat the evil doctor with the menagerie.
Yeah, well, and it's also it means that Christmas is completely terrifying. I mean, every year, reliably, it is a festival of terror. And then if you follow that up with Boxing Day, "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You" by M.R. James, you have really Christmas.
Oh wow! Are you continuing these traditions with your own?
My kids are a bit young for either of those.
Sure.
And half is specifically terrified of the Speckled Band.
No.
That is the most interesting. Actually, I hadn't thought about this until just a second. Interesting that both of those stories, part of the issue is the bed.
Oh, yeah, that is very interesting. I mean, the Speckled Band is a whole thing where it's about. I mean, I think there's this whole imperialist reading of it where this doctor goes to India, comes back insane with tigers and snakes, and starts killing this quiet English village. It's a very fascinating document. Anyway. That's all beside the point. So it sounds like it was Tolkien early. I was going to say Tolkien is a great writer, but he's maybe missing a sense of humor, which has been one of your kind of hallmarks as a writer. That
is in Farmer Giles of Ham, and it's in The Hobbit much more than it's in Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings doesn't have a lot of laughs. But the shorter books that he wrote, and when I was very little, we had the Father Christmas letters as well, which are very funny. Which is Father Christmas.
Is that Tolkien? I don't know. I'm not familiar.
He wrote letters to his grandchildren, and he illustrated them. And of course, it turns out he's doing watercolor inks, and they're beautiful watercolor inks.
Wow!
Drawing inks, beautiful illustrations. I would bet the Mysterious Bookshop has a copy.
Yeah, really. Put in your orders.
Yeah, so blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so Tolkien actually, I mean, there is some funny in there. Yeah, and then later, so but Woodhouse you have funny, and then later you kind of you get it. I mean, Douglas Adams was a huge thing for a while, But
well, can I tell you the names I wrote down in the margin of my copy of Seven Demons? And this was just as various things. And stop me if one of these was or was not an influence. Flashman, did you ever get into those? I have Carl Hiaasen.
Yeah. Those Carl Hiaasen, definitely big time. I was incredibly delighted because he blurbed for Price You Pay, and I was just like, oh my god, yeah.
I would be too.
I was just like, oh, that's amazing. I read him endlessly. I mean, but that was later.
And then I started to think about this. Well, I'm sort of interested in later. I started to think about the 70s people like Vonnegut, Pynchon, Elmore Leonard. Are any of those sort of traced into your later? Okay.
I love Vonnegut, but much later. And Pynchon.
And how about? Oh, sorry.
No,
I was gonna say, how about in terms of like when you were starting as a writer, was that you went first into film? Is that correct?
Yeah, because it seemed like too much of a high bid. I was like, I'm not going to stand up at the age of whatever I was and say, I'm going to write a novel. And, as it so happens, my dad has also done something in that regard, that I was just like, I'm not doing it. So and Dad's relationship with film was always odd and sometimes not very satisfying. And I thought, okay, well, if I do film, then I can carve out something that is just me without kind of really worrying about it. I wasn't great at it. I think I'm probably better at it now, actually. But screenwriting is a very specific discipline, and I chafed against the restraints of it very much. You've got your kind of 90 to 120 pages. You're working to a budget and so on, and it used to drive me crazy. The process of development would drive me crazy. Where someone would say, I think you need to change this, and you change it, and they go, "Why have you changed that? That is terrible." And you're like, "Ah." And I'm just not very good at that. I long for the perfect editorial dialogue, which obviously you really only get from your partner. Not you in the real world. You can't actually have that in a professional relationship in that way, because the professionals always tell you kind of, you know what, you've screwed it up. Your partner has to be a little bit gentler.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, it sounds to me almost as if you did your apprenticeship out of public sight, which seems very enviable. Like you learned your craft and as someone who wrote a first book and is now looks at it and thinks like, oh God, I could re-edit it a million times over. It sounds like you got in your reps as a writer doing screenwriting, and that comes across in all of your fiction, both under, I think, this series, the Aidan Truhen series, and as Nick Harkaway. Do you think it's
my first book, and people love it, and I kind of go, ooh, did I make some mistakes? I think everybody does the first book. I think you just kind of, and the worst thing is if your first book is the one that everybody loves and none of the others, you're like,
I know. You're like, read the others. I learned more. Exactly. But so I guess the question I really have is, do you still feel as if the lessons you learned writing screenplays have made you a better fiction writer?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yes, and also the rejection of a lot of them. So I mean, I tend to be quite maximalist, and that's because I had spent 9 years being very disciplined, and I kind of didn't have a lot of fun. I mean, it's not only that. I'm not naturally a very shy and restrained person, so I kind of I like words. I like words, and I like excitement. I like fireworks. And actually, I mean, that's also kind of, that's a big part of the whole Jack Price thing for me, is just I was saying this earlier, to be able to write something that is about what it is, and that isn't necessarily freighted too heavily with kind of social comment or big themes or kind of predictions about the future and so on, and just kind of go, my God, in this grim pandemic year, I really love just books that are just what they are, and you just go, yes, I am enjoying this. I am having fun with this, and now it is done, and I feel I could read it again, or I could not. That's fine. I don't need to go back through it to try to understand it. I'm just kind of like, oh, that was fun. You know, that was, and I feel for
this is
like 6 hours I was in another place, and that's great.
This is definitely like you get lost on it with a margarita next to you on the beach, kind of like you're not like thrown back upon your own resources, because there's always so much happening from line to line on the page that there's kind of not time to breathe. It's almost like Tarantino-esque in that way, where you're so immersed that. So I want to talk about these two identities. I guess you have Nick Harkaway and Aidan Truhen. Excuse me. I don't see them as, I see them as continuous, obviously. I mean, if you look at The Gone Away World, which is a Nick Harkaway novel, that bears a lot of similarities to these Aidan Truhen novels, I think. And also, I mean, throughout your work, you talk about some of the same themes and stuff. What motivated this new direction? And if I can read from your author bio, it says, you live in London. You worked in commodities of one sort or another until you were 30, which is an age when a man wants his positive achievements to outnumber his acquittals. I hope you achieved that. He's trying to reinvent himself as a writer. We'll see how it goes. Would you care to comment, Mr.
That obviously is just kind of that's octopus ink in the water. I mean, I just kind of no. So I mean, honestly, what happened was I just finished writing Nomon. It was mid 2016. And I don't know if you remember 2016. It seems like an extremely long time ago, but the world got a little strange. And it got particularly in mid 2016. It got a little strange in the UK. We made a questionable political decision, which we are about to start enjoying the fruits of. And gosh, is that going to be a painful awakening for a lot of people? And it already is for quite a lot of people. And
we all heard about the shipment of dildos that got held up at the channel, for starters.
I didn't hear about this.
Tens of thousands of dildos. This is a Jack Price detail, if I've ever heard of it. Tens of thousands of dildos that couldn't be imported to an Essex sex shop or something like that because of Brexit. So no, of course, please go on. 2016, I think was I'm going
to stay with that story. That is okay. All right. 2016.
Can we just do dildos for the rest of the time? Yeah, sorry.
Well, I mean, also the customs guys just sort of standing there, going to go, okay, so what are we going to do with this?
I know, arms crossed. But...
and I mean, there's some bonded warehouse jokes we could make. Anyway, look. No, 2016. I was not happy. In fact, I was very, 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 very angry. And it seemed to me that the world had just kind of done this insane thing to me, and I didn't know what to do about it. And incidentally, one of the things that was promised to us about Brexit was that the difficulties it would create would serve to make us more creative, and we would become supercharged in a creative sense. So what really pissed me off about the fact that my response to Brexit was to write another book was that I felt like I was fulfilling that prophecy. So then I was even angrier. But so basically,
you owe Boris Johnson a thank you note.
Oh yeah, I can think of a very special thank you note. Oh God, that guy. Anyway.
So Noman, I know he drives me insane too. So I mean, I think Noman is the last book that you published, and you've said in interviews it was extremely difficult to write. It's like a beautiful kind of novel, very intricate about a surveillance state in the near future. What possessed you to write such a difficult novel? What was Aidan Truhen born out of it?
Kind of. Well, I mean, so Aidan Truhen was born out of fury and dismay, but also from fatigue. I'd spent 3 years or something on Nomon, and Nomon was an impossible. It was like one of those kind of gizmos you see in science fiction movies occasionally, kind of in the more kind of East European variety, where there's a kind of Rubik cube made of steel that slowly bifurcates and then bifurcates again, and gradually turns into some kind of tesseract that drives you mad. And Nomon was very much like that. It just became more and more complicated as I went along, and I mean that was kind of what I wanted from it. I mean, this is a really terrible confession, but it is what I decided to do. I wanted to write a novel which possessed the shifting quality of the Borges story, the Garden of Forking Paths. I wanted to do that.
Wow.
And halfway through the book, I realized that when Borges said he was too lazy to write novels, he was not kidding. There was a reason. If you write like him, even in a small way, if you try to write that kind of story and you try to write it as a novel, your brain starts to ooze out of your ears. And that is
Well,
what
the
happens.
possibilities multiply so quickly.
Yeah.
It's like the library. It's like you
You
just
know-
keep going and
You know the inevitable scene in any serial killer movie where there is like a red string across the room, and there are like pictures and connections.
yeah.
And like on the floor, there's a sort of pentacle or whatever. What I had realized when I was writing No One was that actually the way people get like that is that they try to plot a really convoluted novel and they put the string up on the walls, and then one day you realize that you've turned into a serial killer just from like the sheer process, the weight of complexity. And then what happens is that all of the tack or the tape or whatever that you use to stick the string to the walls gives up at the same moment. And there was a moment in about 2015 where I was standing, or I came into my study to find that this kind of insane serial killer nest of story that I had created had all fallen off the wall onto the floor. And it was just like, and I was like, yes, that is exactly the state of the universe in terms of my narrative.
So now in a book, there would be one string left that showed the arc of the story and you would have an epiphany. But unfortunately, in real life, I've been in that position and all you're left with is your mess of a book.
Once I would like to have that happen, the kind of serendipitous, okay, look, from the ashes emerges the perfect sui generis answer to your question. Hell
exactly.
no.
I'm still waiting too. So then Aidan Truhen was born out of your anger about politics and also maybe the complexity of writing Nomen.
I had to learn how to write non-linearly to write Nomen. I was stubborn and I tried to write from beginning to end, which was impossible. And I was doing kind of layering it like I was 3D printing the book, and that was great. And then I realized that was going to take forever. And I began to realize that actually what I could do was write out of sequence and have it fall backwards into itself, and then it would work. And then coming out of that, I sat down and started writing, and I didn't write Price You Pay from beginning to end. I wrote the fun bits and I joined them together. I wrote the bits that were driving me nuts. I wrote the bits I wanted to write. And then I put them all together, and that was a much easier way of doing that. And that was a kind of, it sounds trivial, but it was a big learning experience for me in terms of writing style. So it was that. Was
and so the pseudonym, we have to ask.
Well,
where did that?
Okay, so the pseudonym specifically. First of all, why did I need a pseudonym? Because no one was coming out. They were going to come out at the same time. It was kind of a mess. And I can't remember whether it was me or Edward Castamar in the States or Jason Arthur here in the UK, who said, you should have a different name. We should do it that way, or whatever. Or whether it was someone else altogether. But anyway, it was like, okay, we'll do it that way. So, and so then there was the question of what would the pseudonym be, and I had this notion that I would, in Nomon there is a character called Diana Hunter who is a novelist, and she writes a series of novels, and one of them was called Mr. Murder Investigates. I was like, okay, I'm going to put this book out, I'm going to call it Mr. Murder Investigates, and I'll just kind of tweak it slightly so that it meshes with the Diana Hunter story, and then when everybody kind of, obviously what they will all do is start Googling the characters in Nomon, because obviously that's what you do when you read a book, you just, they will find that Diana Hunter actually is a novelist, and they will be wowed on an additional level, and I will be frightfully clever. And then I was like, and that is a terrible idea on so many levels. But
so it's an anagram.
There we go.
What's it called? Oh, I feel so stupid. I wondered for ages. I was like,
I thought you knew that, because I wondered if that was how you nobbled me on day one, because you nailed it. You called it in the New York Times. You're like, I think this is Nick Harkaway. I was like already the worst kept secret in publishing. This is awesome.
I did. I'll give your team credit. I had to do some digging, but I did. I dug.
You actually sleeped me.
You've been spooked by the best, Nick. I'm sorry.
I tell you, it is genuinely hard to keep a secret. I was amazed by how hard it was.
Impossible. So does it feel liberating, or as a writer, does it matter to you knowing you're okay? It does.
It does.
I'd love to hear about that.
As I said, I wanted to write stories which didn't have. When I'm writing my kind of normal books, they're very often, if not on the surface, underlying, there is some kind of perception that I have about what the world's going to look like, or what's going wrong, or whatever, and I have to be true to that thematically and narratively, as well as whatever else I'm doing, which is a layer of complexity, and that's kind of my shtick as Nick Harkaway. That's kind of what I do, and I want people to come away from a Nick Harkaway book and go, huh, now I am looking at stuff that I look at every day and I do not see it the same way. That is not what happens to you really with Aidan Truhen books. You kind of go, unless you're looking at some kind of ordinary household implement that you now kind of regard as either obscene or dangerous, but generally speaking, that's not the experience. It's just kind of, wow, I had fun with that. I'm slightly exhausted, and now I could eat. And that's all I want from you. It's kind of, that was fun. Let's go. And that's it. That is liberating. And it's genuinely a kind of legitimate reason to separate the two. And now it's even more fun because I can still do all the same stuff, but everybody gets to know, and kind of, they can argue about whether I'm more of a jackass in one persona than the other. That's fine.
So are people, do you feel different writing the two kinds of books? I mean, it's a very funny question to ask, but like, I know you don't sit down and like put on a cape, like what, or, glasses and a suit, but you must feel.
I have a pair of aviator goggles, which I put on like Snoopy sometimes when I'm,
Could you do just the rest of the interview in those by any chance? Do you have
actually, and now I have dropped something breakable on the floor. I don't know. I do not know where they are, is the honest truth. Oh, here we go. These are on my Twitter profile.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean,
those are beautiful.
There are people who look handsome in these. I am not one of those people. I think you're killing it. That was very nice of you. But when I actually put them on, I do not. This is not a good look.
So that's how you write the Aidan Truhen books. You put those on.
No. I just sometimes in the morning, they're here on my desk. I can't even remember why I have them. There was some intricate reason why they were very important. I think just because they're flying goggles, to be honest with you. So if I really need to kind of wake up and get going, I was like, hey, flying goggles and coffee. And I did that a lot with No One because I really needed momentum. With the Aidan Truhen books, I sit down, I put on some trashy music, and I'm just kind of like, okay, what terrible thing is happening now? And I just
now I need to hear what the trashy music is. What are we talking? Are we talking about Def Leppard, or are we talking about
anything? I mean, trashy is very unfair. I have a weird eclectic music taste. So I got very excited. This is distinctly non-trashy. There was a movie a few years ago called The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which I enjoyed. And there is a guy who sings
all the Bowie songs.
In Portuguese, exactly.
Seu Jorge, is that his name?
That's right. There we go. And I have I
love that soundtrack. That's a great one.
And I have a lot of his music, beyond even the Steve Zissou stuff. So that gets thrown in. Then for a while, I had a lot of stuff. Hold on,
I got to stop you, Nick. You've told us an absolute falsehood, because that's Pinky Off of the Teacup Fancy music. That's like very like smooth, good Brazilian.
The thing is, that is absolutely.
I need some trash.
No, that is not trash. No, well, this is what I said. That was a total falsehood. Well, but I mixed that up with like a lot of Queen. Basically a lot of things that get served up on when you're doing Peloton. Just anything. I mean, so none of it is trashy music in any real sense, but it's like a lot of it is kind of poppier rather than I don't know. I'm paranoid about my music taste. My whole life, people have been like, seriously? So I just apologize for it in advance. But
surely that's the sign of good taste, though. That's the sign of not following other people's.
I think so, but then you try and get some.
Or you have terrible taste. That's the other possibility.
I mean, in many ways.
Only do.
I am big enough and old enough now. I stand by my music taste, and indeed I stand by my taste generally. But I do recognize. Let's say that I recognize that my music taste does not dovetail smoothly with many other people's music taste, and so so I have lots of kind of rock music. For Jack Price, I have lots of rock music. I have a bunch of basically. I had the theme from True Blood on the rotation for a while. I mean, just anything that is just right. I mean, just I want to do bad things. I mean, that's a Jack Price perfection moment.
Well, do you ever have? I mean, I want to talk about Jack Price, and then I think we're going to answer some reader questions. So please, audience questions. Please type them into the chat box, and we will ask Nick and Aidan all of your questions. If you want to ask them about embarrassing music choices or aviator goggles or anything under the sun. But I'm interested in Jack Price just before we get off the subject, maybe of Aidan Truhen altogether, which is so you have these two novels, and the voice of Jack is really what carries them. And yet the way you talk about them is very light. You talk about them as if they're sort of not disposable, but maybe a little more of a confection. But I find Jack actually very interesting and engaging, not just like a. And I was wondering if you do too. I mean, I was wondering what relation do you stand to in relation to this, homicidal but decent person?
I mean, I think all of our characters have to be us on some level. I think, Jack is a kind of a daydream version of me in the sense that he's a terrifying criminal mastermind, and just as he is kind of liberated to do terrible things in the first book by the fact that basically what happens to him is that the rules of engagement are overtly changed. Usually in real life, when the situation around you is about to change in some radical way, no one tells you. There's a window during which you can work it out, and most people in that, and this is just people cling to. Actually, the pandemic is a perfect example of this, right? When in the early days of 2020, it was fairly apparent to experts that we were moving into an 18-month process, but my government for sure was telling everyone it'll all be over by September. And actually, they were telling
we were told Easter, so I think the transgression of our government was maybe even greater. Yeah.
But actually, people believed that, and they believed it because they did not want to believe that the overarching rules of engagement of life had changed. And there were some wonderful articles written around that time, people saying they have changed, and this is what you need to do. You need to kind of buckle down, get ready, survive, whatever. And that's the kind of the moment where if you are a given person in a given space, you recognize the change. And so in Jack's context, someone comes along and goes, hey, guess what? We changed the rules. We're going to try and murder you. And there's really anything you do now is excusable because we are the worst people on earth, literally the literal worst people on earth. And
I will say that at the culmination of the novel, he does the ultimate rule change back. So he gets his revenge. I won't say more; it's a spoiler. But I loved that turn at the end where he subverts maybe the most primal rule. Anyway, something I do often when I do interviews with writers whose books I like is ask them a assortment of questions just before we get to the audience questions from the Proust questionnaire. Would you be willing to undergo that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, here we go. What, you can just say pass if you don't like the question. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Oh, that is a question I should be able to answer. In a kind of limited human sense, I'm in it. Perfection is the thing that makes that question hard. Because, I love Italy. I love the lakes in Italy. I love Sicily. Walking around beautiful landscape along coastline with my family, having wonderful food is pretty much perfect happiness for me on a kind of, on a human level. But it's that word perfection which elevates it to a kind of status of divinity, and then suddenly you need to kind of throw in apotheosis. But I'll take the beach. There's a particular beach bar that my entire family is dreaming of going to. So right now, today, I would take that.
Is it in Italy? Is that the?
It is. Yeah. No, it's on a lake. It's
wow, how wonderful. Well, your Borges, who I guess is one of your heroes, said infinity is the one concept that corrupts all others, and I think that's it. Okay, what is your greatest fear? Again, you don't have to answer these.
Greatest fear. I am not a fan of dying. That is a very simple one for me. I just having just seen a little bit of death up close over the last few months. Also, I have to say it is not easily done with dignity. It's you can be dignified through it, but dignity is hard to preserve. I think we should all avoid it. I think it's not.
I mean, it's harder if you're in a Jack Price novel, but I know what you mean.
Jack Price novel.
What do you consider the most overrated virtue?
Oh, yeah, there's a couple of those.
I'm all ears.
What is the most overrated virtue? I might say nationalism.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a very good one. Okay, let's move on. Which words or phrases do you overuse?
At the moment I overuse like. Every single US TV show that I watch at the moment uses like, and it's fallen into my everyday dialogue, and I use it a great deal.
This is how we get you. We're getting you through Netflix. Everyone will be American soon. So What are you watching? Can I ask? Or
you can? Yeah, no. I mean, I am watching. I have been watching anything. I watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I've been watching Marvel shows on a loop. I watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I was lucky enough to meet Bob Morales when I was in New York a few years ago, and he was a really nice guy. He was really nice to me, and everybody that I know who knew him seems to have kind of liked him very much. And so I was just really pleased to see that. My view of the show is completely skewed through the fact that I was like, oh my god, this is Bob's book. So I was really excited about that. And I followed it up with WandaVision, which I thought was kind of creepy and disturbing and confusing until the end. Or not confusing in a bad way, bewildering until the end. And then it obviously had to segue into the next phase of the Marvel thing.
Well, so that's interesting. Do you self-identify at all as a sci-fi writer? I mean, would you say that?
I will gladly on any day self-identify as a sci-fi writer, simply because I was accepted by science fiction when my first books came out in a very kind of gentle way, where they taxonomized and they were like, well, this may or may not be science fiction, but we'll take it, and I love science fiction. I've always been a science fiction reader, but there's a whole vexed discussion of what is science fiction, and it gets you into a conversation about science fiction versus literary writing, which I find increasingly profitless and aggravating. I'm kind of perplexed by writings or literary writings' unwillingness to embrace technology, as if the history of humankind was not the history of how we respond to our technology and produce more of it, and as if you could find the human only by depriving people of their technology. And it's like, you take a mobile phone away from someone, they don't instantly become more human. They just become, they're in a slightly more difficult situation. You get to see their emotions play out differently, but it's not necessarily more authentic. You put them on a desert island, you're not seeing them as authentically more human. You're seeing them in a crisis, where part of the crisis is that they have to rebuild the history of technological development in order to achieve shelter, fire, and so on. It's a slightly macho and a very weird, plus they're also still vaccinated, right? And there's a lot of things going on there, which I kind of have distaste for in a way on a conceptual level. And I think this kind of vaccinated time travel version of literary writing, which is essentially kind of historical fiction modernized. I have nothing against actual historical fiction. It's just, it just drives me a little crazy. So I think it gets you into that discussion immediately. I think some of it is profitable if you have it at a super high level with really interesting people. Mostly it just turns into a kind of is cold comfort farm science fiction because it takes place in an alternative reality where the UK is at war in, I can't remember where, and they all use video phones in the 50s, and I mean, actually, who has time anymore?
Well, it's interesting. Your mother was a editor, I believe I read, and your father, if people don't know, was John le Carré, obviously the novelist, and he famously was someone who quote unquote transcended genre, which has become to be kind of like almost a taboo phrase, but who kind of lived on both sides of genre, and you do the same. Is that a conscious inheritance in any way, or is it just something you've always found yourself writing sort of unclassifiably?
I think, I mean, I'm just not very good at following rules, and I'm kind of not. I'm not very interested to pigeonhole myself. I mean, like that makes my publishers' lives much harder that I don't do that. I kind of, on a commercial level, I absolutely should. There's always this kind of slightly vexed conversation when one of my books comes out. We all sit down, kind of like, well, how are we going to publicize this? Who are we going to try and publicize it to? And what kind of book is it? And the answer is, through gritted teeth, it's one of Nick's books. But at the same time, the people who read me are happy with that. They like that crossover, and I think interesting things happen at intersections in liminal spaces. I'm kind of that's kind of where I live. So that's what I do. And I live with that. And a lot of the time that means you get, is this science fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it literary writing? And I'm kind of like, actually, somebody else can figure that out.
Well, this raises an interesting question, which everyone always wants to know the answer. My chat function is all screwy, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get access to the questions, but I have about 1 million more questions. So let's, I'm going to ask a couple more.
So I can check. If we get to that point, I can check and see who's there.
We'll let Tom check. But before I do that, I do want to know, people are always curious what's next. And I specifically want to know what's next for Jack Price and Doc and the remains of the 7 demons, who are now 8 demons and an intern. So I would love to know just the general. And also, now that you've said it, I'm curious if you ever have thought about writing like a longer form fantasy thing, knowing that Tolkien is such an influence on you and that you have that gear. I'm very curious if that's ever crossed your mind. So maybe I see Tom has come back. Maybe we'll leave it at that question. What's next, and what's next after that, in a way?
I wrote a book for NaNoWriMo last year, which I always said I would do, and I never had. And November was just a convenient moment, and I was like, oh, this is exciting. Sure. And I didn't. I wrote, I think, 62,000 words, and I was going to finish it in December, and then I had to go down to Cornwall because my dad was ill, and so then in early March I finished that off, and that is a kind of science fictional noirish riff. So it's interesting. It's actually probably a kind of Truhen Harkaway fusion book. So it's kind of the coming together. So that's one of the things that's next. I'm super excited about that. Actually, I just sent it to my agent the other day, and he's pleased with me. I got a gold star. So
do you have a title for it?
I do, although I'm not sure that I like it. It's called Titanium Noir. But
I like it.
I wonder whether that's slightly generic, but we'll get to that. That's everybody always changes the title of my books. Actually, the original title of 7 Demons was Burn Baby Burn, BERN, which I thought was hilarious, and everyone else was just like, no. So, no, that's not as funny as you think it is. So,
well, and you get a lot of disappointed Bernie supporters arguing.
Yeah, that's right. That was why in the US, that was why they were just like, no way. To me, that's the song "Burn Baby Burn," right? But unfortunately, my timing is terrible, geopolitically speaking. Anyway, so that's one thing that's next. And then actually, I was also working. I have a Nick Harkaway novel, which I was working on before all that, which is about cloning, which I have also to edit. And then I have some script work that I need to be doing. So I have a bunch of stuff. I have a busy year.
Well, I'm so thrilled as a fan. And thank you so much for answering all of these impertinent questions. And everyone out there, I really urge you to get this book. Actually, get the price you pay and this book, and just go out to like the beach, and in 48 hours, they'll both be gone, and you'll have given them to your friends. So Nick, thank you so much. That was a real pleasure for me. And Tom, thank you so much too.
Yeah, thank you both. I hope that our audience is just being shy tonight. I can see that we've had viewers this whole time, but I did get some error with the Facebook communication. So if you're on Facebook, trying to ask us questions. Please forgive us if they somehow didn't come through. It gave me an error message a couple times. But that was actually just about an hour. That was a fantastic conversation, and I don't know how much better we could do to end on than what's next. So this will this video will live on. If anyone missed the start, you can see wherever you're watching it now. It'll be on YouTube and Facebook, so you can watch it from the beginning. As Charles said, please order 7 Demons. I just posted the link in the chat, or you can come into the store. We also, of course, have Charles's books, the Lennox Mystery Series, and thank you both so much. I mean, any final words?
Only that I'm super frustrated because I haven't got a copy of the book to wave. My package is in transit, so I want to wave it. I'm very excited to see it in the real world. So, but thank you guys.
I'm feeling pretty superior. I have it right here.
Yeah. Charles, it was really good to talk to you, and Tom, thank you so much. I'm actually genuinely really very excited at the moment about this book and just kind of talking to people about it and about being Aidan. So it's lovely, and it's very uplifting at the end of this kind of pretty grim year. So thank you.
Well, thank you again, and have a great night. Or actually, I guess I don't even know where you are time difference wise. So thank you for both humoring us. I guess Charles is 3 hours behind me, and Nick is however many hours ahead of me. So thank you both for making yourselves available, and hope to see you both in New York or wherever.
Yes.
Too long.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you. Good night.
Perfect.